Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.12 mid lane tier list. So, if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of mid lane changes this patch. We saw a lot of direct nerfs towards high elo skewed mid lane picks. The likes of Akali, Akshan, Twisted Fate, Tryndamere all got tagged. On top of this, we saw buffs towards some of the weaker AD assassins at the moment. Neferi, Talon, buff towards Grudge, which did help these champions indirectly as well. And then some other shift arounds, but let's cover the mid lane tier list. So, to begin with, the D tier is now going to consist of 3 champions instead of the 2, which were previously Corki and Azir. Both these picks obviously incredibly pro-bound. Corki is probably the most pro-bound pick in the game at the moment, where he is really high presence in competitive at the moment, but borderline unplayable within the mid lane. This champion's sat at like a 43% win rate, I believe. It's something really absurdly low, but it comes with being an early game skewed, relatively easy to play, pretty simple win con champion. Obviously they nerfed down the E this patch going into 14.12. Tried to buff up the Q to try and move away from like your Halo Blade's really strong harass early on in the game. Gave him a bit more attack speed growth. It's nerfed him down a bit, but in turn he's still very high elo pro skewed, and he sits within the D tier. And in this case, obviously he's been nerfed for a while now, pro-bound like Corki, but yeah, I still see some level of presence within competitive. Joining them is Ezreal. Ezreal mid has actually seen a bit of a spike. We've even seen a game of Ezreal mid in competitive now. I believe Quid or Quad, one of them, played it in the LCS, and it did relatively well. I would not really recommend this pick within solo queue. It tends to underperform quite heavily, even though Ezreal is a bit better this patch with the buffs which he received. Moving on to the C tier, we have a couple of champions here. So Yasuo is still underperforming. Obviously, the removal of lethal tempo has definitely hurt him, but he does have other options in fleet, but he's still underperforming. Zed did receive a bit of love with Shoulder's Grudge being buffed. That it tends to be a pretty cool item on him, but he is kept weak because he's frustrating to play against, so he also sits within the C tier. Katarina has been underperforming since the beginning of this split. She has some AD build variations which people do need to optimize, and she should do a bit better with these, but for the moment she is still underperforming. She belongs within the C tier. LeBlanc probably sits towards the high end of the C tier. Honestly, this champion's not in a bad spot at the moment. She was left pretty bad for most of last split in 14 till 14.10. But now with the W buff she received, alongside I believe some Q buffs, she's doing a bit better. She is currently sat within the C tier. Orianna is weak at the moment. A lot of people tend to be confused on why I have this champion in the C tier, but she really does underperform in solo queue at the moment. She is receiving buffs in 14.13 for this reason. I believe her base AD is going up from 41 to 44, which is a scary buff. That is a very high elo pro skewed buff, and we might just see Orianna pro jailed with a change like that. I hope they go away from that and like look towards other things within her kit. That is probably not the direction they should take. Kassadin has been underperforming ever since they nerfed his E down. I believe they nerfed his EAP ratio by 10%, and he's been underperforming since then. Kiana, very high elo elite skewed pick, belongs in the C tier for the average player. I really would not recommend playing this champion unless you're willing to sink a lot of time into it. There are no other champions joining the C tier. In fact, we have a couple of champions moving out of the C tier. To begin with, Vladimir is moving up into the B tier. He received a plethora of buffs towards his W this patch, and it's really helped him a bit. Obviously, his W was his weakest spell, gave him a bit more damage, lessened the penalty on that, and overall, it has definitely helped him. Rabadon's Rush looks to be the best way to play Vladimir at the moment, and he belongs within the B tier now. Talon is also going to move up to the B tier. They gave him some W outgoing damage. I believe that went up by 10, and the attack speed, his Q ranged attack now scales with, his Q cast time now scales with attack speed, which also does help him. It allows him to combo a bit faster. He now moves up to the B tier. Alongside them, we have Ziggs, who is fine within the mid lane, a solid artillery mage. I would recommend the likes of Xerath over Ziggs, though at the moment Xerath is in a very good spot. Ziggs has a bit better sieging, but he also, he belongs in the B tier at the moment. Wei tends to operate a lot better within Elite and Pro at the moment. He's a fine pick. You can find success on this champion if you learn the rotations and yeah, get the combos down. Then yeah, he's a solid champion. But for the moment, I'm going to leave him within the B tier. Ryze, underrated champion. Honestly, I think Ryze is in a solid spot at the moment compared to where he has been in the past. Once again, you're looking at like your rower, your phase, rower, you're running your phase rush. Archangel is really solid item. You're going your full AP variants, so I wouldn't really recommend dabbling in tank that much anymore. It doesn't tend to find that much success. Jace, a solid pick. Obviously, he got buffed. Well, I mean, he got buffed towards the end of the last split. He's doing a bit better with those. He was a big loser of Eclipse, losing its lethality and some of the items being a bit weak on him. Grudge was one of them. But Grudge being buffed this patch has definitely helped him. He's a solid B tier option. A good AD pick if you like Jace and you're like coming from top lane into the mid lane. We have Akali here. Akali is a bit weaker. Honestly, sat towards the back end of the B tier, close to the C tier. She got nerfed this patch. I'm honestly kind of surprised. Well, I mean, I'm surprised and not surprised at the same time. I've thought, I mean, Akali has been decent for a while. Never really found a huge amount of success. Was always sat in the negative for like mid and low elo. Obviously, she wants to be balanced for like high elo elite, where she has been overperforming for a while, so it makes sense in that space. I don't know if they went after the right kind of things for Akali. They did try to compensate with some total AD ratio, but it was kind of weird, the change they made. She sits within the B tier. Obviously, her E was overloaded with damage. This has lessened that to an extent, so yeah. Bottom of B tier now. Syndra, also within the B tier, received a nerf to her Q AP ratio at the end of Season 13. Has been fine since, obviously, Lunan's Companion is a bit better for her now that it's all in one burst rather than, like, this, like, dot, which it used to be. She sits within the B tier, though. Malphite, this is primarily just the AP Malphite variant. You don't tend to see tank Malphite within the mid lane, even though it does perform quite well. Like, I would really recommend playing tank Malphite when you are into heavy AD comps as, like, a flex option. But yeah, if you're going like your Malignance, Lichbane, Nash's variant, like your huge tower sieging, one-shot combo kind of build, he probably sits in the B tier for that at the moment. There was some guides on it, but they're kind of outdated. Obviously, First Strike got nerfed this patch, and that was primarily what it was running. I believe you can kind of alternate between like Comet, and that will still work quite nicely for you. Lissandra, also within the B tier, she has build variants which can function on her. Blackfire Torch does seem to have some level of success. Malignance, obviously, on paper sounds good. Lissandra really does value her ult quite a bit, but you can go the likes of Lunan's Companion. You can find success on that build variant, and there are like optimizations to be done here, and she is in a fine spot. Tends to be more utilized as a counter pick at the moment. Zoe, fun fact about Zoe is she is really oppressive within China at the moment. Honestly, it surprises me just how high her ban rate is over there. I mean, Freak was talking about this as being like one of the big things, like cross region, which differs from regions. The likes of Kane, Zoe, obviously performed quite well within China. I believe there was one other they nerfed recently, which was Blitzcrank was really overperforming in China as well, which is why they nerfed him down. But yeah, Zoe sits within the B tier, but yeah, does tend to find success in China at the moment. Twisted Fate is going to drop all the way down from the S tier to the B tier. They have over-nerfed him, which is, I mean, it's unfortunate, but obviously Twisted Fate had been in the meta for a while. It was getting relatively stale, being both good in the top lane and the mid lane. I wouldn't really recommend playing Twisted Fate anymore. He's kind of had his golden age, and yeah, now he's like a middle of the pack champion. Obviously, if you're proficient at playing Twisted Fate, then go ahead. You can still find success on this pick, but he's no longer as overloaded with damage as he was, and he actually functioned like a burst mage on top of being this really oppressive map controller. But yeah, he now sits in the B tier. Moving on to the A tier, so we have Quinn joining the A tier. Quinn is gaining popularity. There have been guides on the Symbiotic Souls fast recall lethality Quinn, where you play around like your movement speed, your burst potential, stuff like this, and it's finding success. Honestly, like, she is a solid A tier pick. Yeah, the popularity is gaining. Something I would recommend trying. If it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. You don't need to play it. It's not meta warping. But if you do enjoy it, that could definitely be something you opt into sometimes. And yeah, Quinn is in a solid spot. A good A tier pick. Fizz is here. Fizz obviously was really strong beginning of Season 14. I feel like a broken record saying this, but yeah, Fizz was really strong. The items got nerfed, he got nerfed. He's now fine. Obviously, more utilized as like a counter pick into certain things, like the ASOL tends to be pretty good in that matchup. Champions with projectiles, which you can dodge quite nicely with your E. vulnerable to your burst potential. Yeah, Fizz, solid A tier champion. Aurelia was really strong 14.10. Bork changes really did help her. She got nerfed. She is now sat within the A tier. She's still a solid option if you are good at the pick and want an AD mid laner. Morgana, I saw some discourse about this champion in the comment section of my last video, talking about the unreliability and stuff like that, which are, I mean, fair enough. Like, the champion does need setup to operate a lot of the time. If you don't have, like, ways of consistently landing Q, then this pick can feel lackluster. But her dot damage with her W, her objective taking, her control, all very strong. Bit of an easier to play champion as well. Her wave clear is fine with the W. You do have the max's ability if you are playing Morgana mid. And yeah, solid A tier pick. Nasus, once again, this pick can kind of differ between S and A tier, really depending on how you play him. Nasus is in a good spot again. Tends to operate a bit better in the mid lane than the top lane. The lane is shorter. You can stack easier. Your mid-game team fighting is really strong. Like, your objectives control when you hit level 6 is great. Like, you have one of the strongest level 6s in the game. Being able to reduce your QCD by 50% just gives you so much stat checking capability. That's just a really solid A tier pick. Tristana really taking over pro play at the moment. I'm honestly surprised at not nerfing this pick in 14.13. She doesn't quite have that same level of success within solo queue at the moment. But still a very solid AD mid lane pick. If you put the games in, she does definitely climb up the tier list. Borderline S+ tier when you're in the high elos, and you really have a feel for the champion. You're buffering skills correctly. You're getting the all-in thresholds correct. Stuff like that can really be the difference between a bad and a good Tristana. She's a solid A tier pick at the moment. Viego is in my A tier. Actually, Viego is not in my A tier anymore. This pick clearly does not have enough play rate to really put him in the tier list anymore. Obviously, he received buffs to like help him out within the solo lanes. It wasn't quite enough. If they swung a bit harder, maybe gone 60% instead of 50%, 75 even. 75 might have been a bit overboard, but yeah, 60% could have definitely seen Viego as being a very solid competitive mid laner. A lot of high elo players are skeptical of this pick. Obviously, when it is strong, it is really hard to play against. He can perma play in E, makes it very hard to really play against this champion. I'll put him in the A tier, but yeah, I probably won't include him in the next tier list, as yeah, the pick is really dropping in popularity quite quickly. Nico is a really unpopular mid laner at the moment. Actually, since her rework, she's kind of gone back to relatively similar play rates. Obviously, tends to be a bit more early game skewed with your harass on your Q. That is where a lot of her power lies, being able to like shapeshift depending on like situations. Like, if you can get the minion into like a full team combo, then there is definitely game changing fights you can like operate within. Same kind of goes for like fiddlesticks. Yeah, it's relatively similar to that with your ultimate, but yeah, you're mainly playing against your early game impressiveness. That tends to be where she really operates and is the strongest. Nico, solid A tier pick. Pantheon, one of my go-to champions at the moment. I really like Pantheon. I think this pick has a lot of potential. Obviously, if you're itemizing him correctly, Clips, Cleaver tend to be like things you can go as like first item slots. And then you're looking at like your Sundered Sky, your Shojin, your Sterix. You can go some of the raw AD bruiser items, your Death Stance, your Moors. But you can also opt into some health AD kind of hybrids like Sterix, once again. Overlord's Bloodmail can be a really solid last slot item if you do have the health to support it. I would recommend Qmax into Wmax and then Emax last. The W cooldown is incredibly valuable. It really does help out in your mid game. Being able to secure picks, that is where he is quite powerful. You do fall off later on into the game, that is definitely something you do have to be aware of. He still struggles into high health targets and tanks, but he's definitely in a better spot at the moment. A solid A tier pick. We're also going to have Vex here. So Vex is a great counter pick option. Great into high mobility picks like Yasuo's, your Aurelia's, your Yone, stuff like that. She is a solid A tier champion. I actually forgot to include Yone. Yone is also going to sit within my B tier. Yone is in a better spot. Obviously, they fixed the rune suggesting haste. It now once again suggests alacrity. He saw some win rate gain there. I kind of expected this, so I did leave him within the B tier. On top of this, he did gain some base magic resist, I believe, which does help him. He now goes from like the bottom of B tier to like the top of B tier. Not quite an A tier pick, but yeah, a solid option once again. Vex is now, moving on from Vex, so now we have Silas. Silas is a great counter pick as well. If you can get the valuable ultimates you want in the game, you're kind of like skill maxing in the correct matchups, whether you need to Q max, whether you need to W max, and then Emax follows from WMax. You can't really Emax to begin with. But yeah, there is power within like your skill order. Your itemization tends to be primarily just Lich Bane into like burst mage items. Electrocute tends to be your primary keystone. There are options with Comet and First Strike, but the nerf stuff, First Strike has definitely hurt that variant. So yeah, I'd recommend Electrocute. Use him as a counter pick. He's a good A tier pick. Echo. Saw a bit of play rate, obviously, at the beginning of last split when like the Hail of Blades, Scorch, E-Star really was like the way to go. People were like playing around a decent amount. Obviously, his play rate just isn't quite as high anymore. But he's still a very solid A tier pick. You still are a good burst mage. And once again, I'm going to put him next to Diana. Both these champions, I believe I put in the A tier for the jungle tier list. Both of them are A tier in the mid lane. Diana, incredibly aggressive early game skew champion. One of the most early game skew mages in the game. Or mage assassins. And yeah, if you can stable your early game, you can find success on this pick. But she really does fall off. That is something you do have to be really aware of. Victor. Solid A tier champion. I believe in this patch or next patch, he received some love to his Q where it now applies on towers. I think it is in 14.12. This hasn't done a huge amount. Obviously, it's very minimal, but yeah. Victor in a solid spot this split. You do have options in your Luden's Companion, your Blackfire Torch. You can find success on both, and yeah, he's a good A tier pick. Asol, obviously was really overperforming for the most of last split. They did end up nerfing him down quite heavily, but once again, if you can scale and like play around your mid to late game, you do have a better early game. I don't want to take anything away from, like, if you're Q tapping, you're getting your Arcane Comet procs in, you're playing around your Violet, you can find success on this champion early into mid game. But yeah, his primary strength kind of lies mid to late game, where you're getting your huge E's, your big ultimates, you're really chunking out tanks with your Qs. There's a lot of power in this champion, and he is very deserving of an A tier spot at the moment. Ari, obviously we have the ban wave going on with the new skin coming out, but this champion's still a very solid A tier pick. I believe people have moved away from Lich Bane and are primarily going Malignance, but you do have other options there. I believe Luden's Companion can function on this champion, but yeah, Malignance tends to be pretty core. You value the ult CD. You can opt into like burst mage items. You can also opt into some more utility focused ones like your Horizon Focus and still find a decent amount of success. Alright, very solid A tier pick. Dropping down from the S tier, we have Akshan. So Akshan has been one of the strongest AD mid laners in Elite play for a while. If this nerf towards him in 14.12 has finally taken him from S tier down to the A tier, he is now no longer the best AD assassin within the mid lane in Elite play. Nice. He's still a solid option. This is probably where he should be at this point. Bit weak for like the average, bit weaker for the average player, but then yeah, once you get into the mid and high elos, then he does find a bit more success. A solid A tier champion. Moving on from Akshan, we have Talia. Talia obviously is going to get nerfed again in 14.13. I believe this is like their third patch in the row where she's been nerfed. They just keep lightly tapping her, like not really going too hard. Obviously they tapped down her Q damage after wave clear. They tapped down her Q, well, they increased her Q mana cost once again, hurting her wave clear, hurting how much she can spam out abilities. But yeah, she still performs really well. Luna's Companion, Blackfire Torch, both work quite nicely if you're looking for burst or you're looking for damage over time. Liandry works really nicely on this pick as well. A very solid A tier pick. Once again, a bit more elite skewed, but yeah, she can operate really nicely in mid and it's fine in no elo as well. Anivia, still a solid A tier champion. Once again, really valuable for her control. I believe the builds tend to lean towards Roa and yeah, Archangels. They're probably his options with like Blackfire Torch, but Roa tends to be historically like one of her better options. I haven't looked at Anivia recently. Like this champion just tends to be like fringe S tier most of the time, or even sat in the S tier. Yeah, Roa, Archangel looks like her standard core. Not really any deviation there. Malignance does have some level of success, But yeah, once again, it's relatively limited. Leandri, Zonya, later on to your build. And yeah, Anivia, solid A tier champion. Vel'Koz, being a bit more successful at the moment, has been for a bit ever since he got buffed. Blackfire Torch, Luna's Companion. Once again, you can alter between whether you want a bit more damage over time, whether you want a bit more burst. Vel'Koz, a very solid A tier champion. Swain is going to get reworked at some point. We don't know when, but this champion is incredibly unpopular. Doesn't really feel supported in any of his 4-3 roles. It really depends on like what you see this pick as. He's a really solid like AP frontline drain tank. Like he has durability if ahead. He's a bit lackluster if behind. You can burst him down and he can be a bit less menacing. But like Blackfire Torch, Rylai, both very successful items on him. Malignance used to be what you go. Obviously, you really did value the ult CD quite a bit. But yeah, there are optimizations there. And you can find success on this pick. A solid A tier champion. One other pick here. So Tryndamere has gone from the S+ tier down to the A tier. Tryndamere was massively overperforming. Probably the best champion in the game last patch. The nerfs to him this patch were pretty big, but they were still not enough to really drop him like any lower. His play rate has really gone down in the mid lane and probably should be taken off at some point, but for the moment he's within the A tier. Obviously your build still tends to lean towards your Ravenous, your Fleet, and yeah, you're pretty obnoxious in how much sustain you have within the lane through your Q, Fleet, Second Wind, if you are going like Grass, but I believe you even run Second Wind if you are running Fleet. Yeah, there's just a lot of sustain on this champion, and it can be really hard to play against if your pick doesn't have the capabilities of all-inning him. Moving on to the S tier, so we have an addition, Garen. Someone said, where is Garen? And I was like, hey, I'll add him to the tier list. He is a good mid laner. Like, I wouldn't really add him if he wasn't a good mid laner. Like, this pick is obviously relatively simple to play, is in a really strong spot at the moment. Conqueror tends to outperform Phase Rush. Stridebreaker, Phantom Dancer, your two core items, and then you can go the likes of Deadman, Sterox. And yeah, the pick has a lot of great itemization. In a strong spot at the moment, a great S tier pick. Malzahar, someone complained that Malzahar was in the S tier, but the simplicity, the setup, the wave clear, the farming, the itemization being good for him finally. Blackfire Torch is a great Malzahar item. He hated Malignance, and yeah, it's good to see that he has a good itemization. He has good itemization. Blackfire Torch, Rylai, Leandri, all three of these really good on this pick. They can be really obnoxious to play against, obviously. The better the players, the harder it is to play Malzahar. He does fall off Emerald, Diamond Plus, but he's still a solid pick, a great S tier champion. Veigar, simple to play, great scaling, has loads of itemization he can like opt into. Roa Seraphs tends to be what I see a lot of people going, but he can go the likes of Luna's Companion for a bit more burst. Shorelia, Deadman, once again, you really do value movement speed later on into the game. That can be something you opt into. Rabadon's is of course core on this champion. He has so much AP through his passive, and yeah, Veigar in a really good spot at the moment, a great S tier pick. Moving on from Veigar, we have Lux. Lux obviously has really obnoxious wave clear with her ultimate, but she is in a great spot at the moment. Luna's Companion if you're going for burst, Malignance if you're going for a bit more ult spam, but I believe Luna's Companion has a bit more success at the moment. And then yeah, you can lean into like heavy AP variants. You can opt into the utility if you're not so far ahead of the curve. But yeah, Storm Surge can work quite nicely on this pick if you are really aggressively ahead. I recommend the Dark Seal and then a Magi if you are snowballing. If you can peel this pick off, she's an incredibly good mid lane artillery mage, a great S tier champion. Next to her, we have Xerath. Xerath is also an incredibly good mid lane artillery champion at the moment. Works quite nicely on both Ludens and Blackfire Torch. Really depends on what kind of game you're going for. If you're looking for a bit more dot, obviously you can opt into the Angie as well, but I would recommend the burst build a bit more. Luna's Companion, you can go Horizon Focus, you can go Storm Surge. Rabadon works quite nice in this pick. Void Staff, Crippling, obviously Void Staff got buffed in 14.12. It's now a bit better of an option you can opt into. Crippling tends to be a bit more standard, but yeah, Veigar in a Xerath in a great spot at the moment, a great S tier pick. Neferi drops all the way from the C tier to the S tier. There's a high chance Neferi is like the best AD mid laner in the game at the moment in low elo. bit more debatable in mid. Obviously falls off quite aggressively into high elo. This champion is incredibly low elo bound. She has a point and click ability on the W where she can really set up a huge amount of her damage. Her Q is a pretty simplistic spell. Obviously you cast one, you apply a bleed, you cast a second, you heal and proc that full bleed. Yeah, the champion's in a great spot at the moment, in a great spot after the buffs. The itemization is really nice for her. Eclipse, I believe, tends to be core first item. You have options in like Profane. I don't believe it finds the same level of success. I mean, yeah, other lethality options, Opportunity, Edge, Grudge, stuff like that can all work quite nicely on her. She is a great S tier pick now. Moving on from that, we have Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia has been really good for a long time now. Her itemization is still great. You're looking at your Roa, your Seraphs, Cosmic Drive, and you can kind of like opt around what AP items you want later into the game. It really depends on what kind of game you're playing. Violet, obviously really good if you're playing against a lot of high mobility champions and you really do value the slow. Cassiopeia, great S tier champion. Annie and Heimerdinger wrap up the S tier. So Heimerdinger has been promoted from the A tier to the S tier. He is in a great spot at the moment, an incredibly underrated champion. There was someone discussing it in the comment section of my last video, and I really did feel like this champion does deserve the push up. He needs a bit more recognition, and yeah, the runes, the items, Blackfire Torch obviously incredibly valuable in this pick, are all super good, and yeah, he is very deserving of an S tier spot. In Annie's case, she has been strong for a while, but still really unpopular. Obviously, you can turn Tibbers into a raid boss with some of the items she has access to. Malignance, Rhyolite, Leandry, if you're looking to play on Tibbers. Obviously, you can still play around your Burst, Luden's Companion, Storm Surge. There are options there. Annie, a great S tier champion. Very simplistic, a great starter pick for the mid lane. And then we have two champions left, and they belong in the S plus tier. So the removal of Tryndamere has, well, I mean, made way for these two picks. Like, Galio has been in a really good spot for a while now. People have kind of caught on to the tank build being very successful, a bit easier to play, kind of gives less room for error. Obviously, this is the Hollow Radiance Riftmaker variant. You can still go like your burst builds as well, though. Lichbane still functions quite nice in this champion. Shrevelia, if you're looking to play a bit more supportive on a lower budget, can also work quite nicely on this pick. Yeah, Galio, great champion at the moment. Really good mid laner, has great control across side lanes. Deserving an S plus spot. In Brad's case, he's incredibly simple. He's incredibly obnoxious with his reapplying slow and the Andrew ticks. Obviously, they have nerfed him a couple of times. He is being nerfed in 14.13 for this reason. Galio isn't. Galio will be probably the only S plus mid laner next patch, I believe. Definitely worth putting the practice in if you are looking for something to climb with now and continuing on to the next patch. In Brian's case, being nerfed down, but he is very much overperforming at the moment. The builds, your Blackfires, your Rhyolites, your Leandry, stuff like this, incredibly potent on this champion with his reapplying burn. Very deserving of an S plus spot. Does fall off a bit more with Elo, but yeah, in a great spot at the moment. Those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.